Right, this is going to be whatever episode number this is of Counterpoints. Giving up on that whole process.
Progressively gotten worse at it.
I'm just mailing it in my whole career pretty much nowadays. You know, everyone knows where that is. So, no, this episode, obviously we're joined by Mauisnake, who went from being someone who I plucked out of obscurity, kind of like Bruce Springsteen in that video where he plucks Courtney Cox out in that music video and she comes up and later on became a famous actor. Seemed totally legit to me, probably real. So just like that, I brought this guy on this show, built him up, you know, eventually got him that gig at EPICENTER. So now you're actually a real analyst. See, that's the secret, Mauisnake. If I can't get good guests, I'll create them, goddammit. I'll start from a blank slate and we'll just make some people famous. Same with Hawker. Exactly, you know, I'm working on people.
Yeah. It's like the scene in Mulholland Drive where the guy is just like, this is the girl. And he just doesn't take any answer but yes for that. And he just like spits the coffee in his napkin and he's just like, that's you. You're that guy. Yeah.
I am somewhat impossible to figure out, much like the movie Mulholland Drive. Who knows what that was about?
I've never fucking seen that movie.
It's not a movie for you, Moses. I'm telling you, as a lifelong fan of Star Wars, Mulholland Drive is not for you. It's just, listen, I'm trying to
go that far.
You know, I said it in the most polite way possible. You know, let's all stay in our lane, shall we, on this one? So, right, the first place we've got to start on this episode. By the way, this episode, as many episodes will be in the future, sponsored by CS Money at this point in time. So just as I'm one of the oldest, most legit people in my field, CS Money, one of the oldest skin marketplaces in the scene. That's all you need to know about that. Right, skip that. I didn't say it was going to be smooth, was this is going to happen. So we've got to... What we're going to do is this. I hate doing events where you start out and you try to talk in chronological order because I find it's just not very interesting. Like, it's very difficult to talk about how a team did at the beginning of the tournament if they won the fucking tournament. Like, obviously it's going to skew it. So why not just go from reverse? Let's just start the conversation with Na'Vi. Because Mauisnake, when we were at Epicenter and we were doing this event, this was an event where Na'Vi looked... I actually thought shit at that event. Like, that was the event where I was out on that lineup with Guardian because not only did Guardian look terrible, but even worse, as a squad, they had, like, you know that concept of, like, flipping the switch? That's normally associated with you flip the switch and you go God mode. They would flip a switch and become terrible. Like, they could just go from being really dangerous to terrible. So what are your thoughts on this new look Na'Vi squad with Perfecto? It was different because obviously now they look sick.
Yeah, I think the fact that Simple's on the off is obviously allowing a lot for them, but at Epicenter there were flashes of people like Boomich taking a lot of initiative and being a really good aggressive CT player. Like, this guy is actually, in my opinion, defining the meta right now for how you should be playing. Like, he's kind of taking that Stewie role for Liquid where he kind of gets info, but he's doing it a way better job than Stewie. He's like, I'd say he's just a better player than Stewie actually nowadays. Maybe he can't op as well, so there's little things that Stewie does better, but like, it's like Boomich now is getting the safest info all the time, and he even like neutralized Astralis completely every time they wanted to go down secret, for example. Like, he would just jiggle peek secret forever and then just drop a smoke at his feet, and he just neutralizes any kind of aggression, just gives his team time to rotate. They can play different setups because of it. So he was doing that a little Epicenter. Now he's doing it just crazily. It's amazing.
What do you think, Moses?
I heard a story when we were at the event talking to Boomich outside. I think Machine was talking to him and asked about it. So Boomich uses the SMG, like an MP9, a lot when he plays. And one of the things he was talking about is this motherfucker goes into like casual, standard face-it pugs and like non-ranked, not FPL, just like face-it pugs. And he just plays with an MP9 from like start to finish. Every single round, MP9. And he just practices it in literally every single scenario that you possibly can practice it. And he just fucking loves that weapon. That's just a cool story. I just really admire that kind of dedication to like grinding out some bullshit just to get better at a certain weapon or a certain scenario. I think that's a really smart thing for him to do if he wants to use that weapon. And I mean, basically anyone can do something like that. Na'Vi as a whole, they had some weird level of aggression at this event where everyone was just on the same page of just attack constantly. And not to talk anything detailed about what they were doing, but I think they're hitting this very nice sweet spot where they know they have so much more they need to add and develop, but they also like are just playing very free. Like, you know, they're all just very comfortable with the fact that they have a long way to go. And they've hit this kind of like weird middle ground between like tactical and like pug style, but with like Simple. When you watch Simple play, he's pugging and everyone else is playing like a real game around him. And I'm very curious to see if that's going to be able to keep up, because at the moment they have a lot of guys playing super well. Perfecto at this event, he won what, like 100% of his 1v2s or 1v1s or something. Like he was like 8 for 8 on him or something at this event. So there's a lot of things that I question if they can continue, but it's no doubt that this is like a top 3 team, and they're going to be a top 3 team for some time. It's just, can they hit this level of sheer dominance, you know, throughout an event, or hit this peak at a playoff of an event?
I think people are gonna realize though how to counter Boomich's play style, this like really info hungry style. Like you just need to post an op on him or contact op on him, because no one really did that, and he puts himself in situations where ops aren't comfortable to begin with. Like, for example, it's secret. Usually aren't just going to get contact played by an op, but that's exactly what Astralis needed to do. So their like answer was to just charge through a smoke and try to rush him, but like that didn't work at all. And if Device isn't really much of a contact op player, so that might not go the best for them. But then the meta games will begin, the mind games will begin. It's like, instead of putting Boomich at a spot that Boomich is usually at, you put up Simple with an op there, and then Astralis just does a contact op play into another op. Like, I'm really interested to see where the mind games go on their CT side, because their CT is like, I think that's their bread and butter right now. I think their T has a lot to get fleshed out on. I don't even think they ran too many good strats, as a matter of fact. I didn't see any I actually really barely saw any executes that were like, wow, that looked like they really thought that through, or like that was a really good sequence of chain flashes or something. It was just like, their CTs are so good, it doesn't matter.
Even Flamey before the grand finals gave like an interview after they won the semis, and he was just saying, you know, we actually played kind of like, you know, we were really worried about a Mirage. We haven't changed anything on a Mirage. And he said he thought it was very stale. He said it was something that he thought that Fnatic especially could read pretty well. So I mean that just kind of goes to show that they do have a long way to go. I think they got this fortunate level out of Simple individually. I'm maybe not fortunate because Simple's so consistent, but Simple and Electronic together just seem to provide so much for this team. And if they don't fix the rest of their issues, this feels like it could be a flash in the pan. And not to be like a Debbie Downer in the whole situation, because this was a fun fucking team to watch, but they need to develop they need to flesh out some of the other areas of their game first. And I know, you know, Perfecto still has some sketchy areas that he needs to develop and grow up into. And it's just going to be, I'm just very curious how this team is going to do in Pro League, because that's their next big test. And I think they could falter a little bit there if they don't realize that they need to get better in certain departments, such as tactics, such as strategy, such as their T sides in general.
Well, I do think one area, though, that I have definitely seen growth in is how the team plays in terms of the style. Like when they brought in Blade, where originally, like, he already had some level of control, and he was like the director of esports or whatever, one of those like bizarre titles, which as far as I can tell, they just gave him as a title because they always wanted to move him to the coach, but he just couldn't be the coach at the time. So they gave him something that implied he was like scouting players and could have some input as a coach, but wasn't the coach because Kane still had that title still. So ever since he became the real coach, which is basically after the major when Zeus and Kane left, you can see the development of the team. Like at first they had the Guardian issue they were trying to work out. To be fair, if your worst player is your primary AWPer, you're going to have a hard time making any style work in this fucking game.
Especially if it's Simple's position originally.
Exactly. But you look over time, like I said, when me and Mauisnake did Epicenter, whatever style they were playing at that point in time had like run into a brick wall. It couldn't make any more progress. They were getting as much as they could. They still had good fragging at times, but they definitely didn't have like a wide playbook. Like they didn't have anything if plan A failed, basically. That was it. It was just a game over. So bear in mind, they didn't have a great in-game leader. Boom, which is pretty new to the role in terms of world history. You don't look at a team and think, right, well, if you haven't got anything now, you can have something a month and a half from now. But it turns out they did. And I would put some of that down to Blade again. Again, he's the guy who's helping pick out the players they recruit. And obviously in this scenario, you actually couldn't have known this, but you need Blade's strength of being like a lower level IGL more than anything right now. It's because, think about it, right? You can't just go out and get the best Russian player. He doesn't want to play in your team or can't be bought. You have to go among the weeds and pick out a player where it's like, who even is that? Well, it's someone we can get. So can he work in our team? And so I actually think the angle that disappointed me about Na'Vi winning this tournament is this, people did that like linear thinking where they were like, right, it must be Perfecto because Perfecto's joined. Like he's actually pretty good, isn't he? It's like, no, the whole point of what I said when Guardi was in the team holds to this day. His only job is, you can even be as shit statistically as Guardian, just don't be a primary AWPer. Like, I will say, he definitely has had some rounds that were like, wow, this isn't bad. Like, hey, he's won some 1v1s, obviously. He had a couple of rounds where, I mean, he had that halfway, never died. That's all great shit. But he clearly isn't some monster individual player. It's just that he's working in their squad. So I think they have had some growth. Like, I agree with you. The thing that I got worried about at this LAN is they just steamrolled everyone. So it's hard to know how good you are when you just everything go, when you front run everyone. But like when I'm thinking of the Blast games, those were pretty straight fire when they had those wins against Astralis there, as they went on to win the tournament. Like there's definitely a lot of promise in this team.
Yeah, but we've been burned by Navi promise in the past, which is what holds me back. Like how many times have we seen Simple, Electronic, or Flamey, or like combination of the like two of those three players just go nuts for like 2 months, and then there's just nothing behind it. And yeah, that's when they have, Zeus and Edward at times, and when they've had some shady lineups and some sketchy players who can't deliver consistently. But I don't know. I've been burned a couple of times, which makes me a little bit hesitant to get on the bandwagon quite yet. But I do know it doesn't really matter, because if Astralis is going to look this week and Liquid is going to look this week and EG is going to look this week, then this isn't going to be a one-off event. Like Navi just has too much individual skill, where if you're not on point, like it's going to be a problem. I will tell you one area I think that's pretty cool for them that I normally criticize in most teams, which kind of feels funny, is their economic decision-making in my mind sucks, but it works for them. Like I fucking hate watching it. Like it's painful to me to watch some of these buys come out, but it works really well. And then to go back to Mauisnake earlier, one of the great counters they have is if you put like a stationary contact op on like with some part of the map, that can be perfect. And like, picking off someone like Simple or Electronic or Boomich. But because they force buy all the time, they're usually putting their opponents in some weird economic situation where they can't fucking afford it, which is like, it works out great. It is some like weird, Duncan, remember, or like you guys remember when they won Cologne, like what was that, last year? Was it 2 years ago, 2018?
2 years ago,
when they beat Big in the finals. They had that was one of the rare times we saw a team overcome Astralis as well during their heyday. And part of it was because the force buy put so much economic problems and economic pressure on Astralis. So that's a really cool feature of their game that it fucking disgusts me to watch, but it works. So I can't really complain. I can't really argue against it.
The problem is, if you've seen how ridiculous Simple's like scout is, that would make you believe every force buy makes sense, because this motherfucker's just killing. Like there was rounds where he was killing 2 or 3 people and then they would lose the round. I was like, what were you expecting to happen in this round? That's the best case scenario. It's a scout, for fuck's sake.
Their CT side, you can give so many of these different players just different guns and it just works out fine. Flamey with a Deagle, Boomich with a CZ. Simple even picked up like the auto shotgun sometimes.
He claims that's like a legit thing as well. He's not
it's the auto shotgun Tech 9.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that combo.
And
which I think is another one where it's like, nah, that is trolling. You're just that good. You have to understand the distinction here, Simple.
He just knows he's going to outplay him or something with it. Yeah, he'll make him come to him or something. Yeah, but
what you were saying earlier though, Moses, like you had an interesting point before about the fact that like basically, I won't say pogging, but put it this way, Simple does whatever the fuck he wants inside the game. That's pretty obvious. Like from watching the last few years of Na'Vi, like when he was in his godlike peak in 2018, right? In that scenario, he had to do everything. He had to entry, fucking win the clutch, get all the kills. But if you look at him last year, I know one of the reasons why some people thought Zebu was better is it did look in last year's team before they got like Guardian and then later Perfecto, when they still had Zeus, it did look a bit like in that team, they just let him bait if he wanted to. Like he was allowed to just be on the outskirts of a map and just do whatever the fuck he wants, find any duel he wants. The problem is, when you're as effective as he is in the game, you should be allowed to do that. Like if anyone doesn't know this, even if you have a team, a legendary sports team, basketball is probably the best example because you can do a lot of solo plays in basketball. It doesn't matter if you're like Michael Jordan's Bulls or any great player. The great player is allowed to break the system at any moment he feels necessary and do a one-on-one play. The point of the system is for the other people. The point of the triangle offense was to help the guy who's like a third-string player play on the same team as Michael Jordan. It's not to help Michael Jordan. If anything, it might actually limit Michael Jordan sometimes if he plays within the system. But you do it to make the system work for the others. And I will say, the reason I also think that works with Simple is I was watching this video that Sean did, Sean Gares, where he made a video about how Simple plays on Train.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And like it's a great video because actually it's not even the kills in the game that are the main point. It's that if you ever watch, Simple basically his game sense is probably the most underrated quality of him as a player because he's so bonkers with his aim. And famously, you remember the old narrative was that he always looked like he was aiming at the floor. So people thought he had like bad crosshair placement, if you remember. There's that famous stat where people said like, oh, he's always looking at the ground. But what they don't realise is the guy's actual game sense is bonkers for a star player. Like I've seen very few star players who had the kind of understanding he does of like where the opponent's going to be, what tactics they're running, what the correct smokes are to counter them. Like he actually has a mad understanding. So if I'm running his team like Blade, let him do whatever he needs to do because whatever he's doing it the best way he can. Use the system for the others. Use Boomich and the IGL aspect to keep the others in place, make them more effective. What do you think, Mauisnake?
I think that Simple's like micro game is the most underrated thing. Yeah, his shots are good, but his decision making for movement and peaks and what angle to clear at any given time is just like insane.
Think about how rarely, considering it's true, he will do crazy flicks. Think about how rarely you ever see him get caught, like just someone behind him, or in a 1v1, he just totally doesn't understand where the opponent is. Almost never.
Yeah, it feels like in a like his only time he'll lose is like a 1v3. He can handle 1v2s just so well. It's like he can just isolate the duels or just like kind of knows the timings and things like that. Or even the meta of how a person's gonna think against him. It's like, okay, I tagged this guy, he shouldn't peek me anymore. I'm gonna go full ham on this guy, even taking an angle that the other guy should peek me from, the original guy, but he just like breaks it because he kills people so fast on top of it that he can get away with these quick like peeks and shots and then just reset and just break the round. I will say I agree, but Simple does have one weakness that didn't really didn't really show itself a whole lot in this tournament because they just smashed everyone, but it did kind of show itself a little bit at Blast. As a player, Simple, and this has been his issue, to be fair, throughout most of his career. I noticed it too right when he joined Team Liquid. He sometimes feels like he has to do too much. He sometimes feel like doesn't have like faith in his like teammate that he's rotating over to. And like I said, I think it got better between Blast and Katowice, but I noticed it especially on Blast on their nuke games because he is the rotator with an AWP that goes from like heaven or locker room and will rotate to support his defender in ramp room. And he will sometimes way overextend with that peak. Like he'll just full commit coming around that corner. I don't know if it's miscommunication. It could be a fuck up on his teammate saying some kind of miscomm, but it happens frequently when in tournaments where he like is vocal about the fact that he feels like he has to do a lot, like he was at Blast. So if this trend doesn't continue, I think that might be some area where you can punish him. And actually, if I'm a team to kind of go up against Na'Vi, what I'm going to try and do is look at where he rotates to and try and punish like maybe one of like if you're playing nuke, try and punish the ramp player a couple times early on because try and make Simple feel like he has to do a lot in ramp room. Try and make him overconfident in his skills and get him to wide swing and get him to commit. And maybe you can 1-for-1 trade him. Maybe you could just straight up pick him off. But in those areas, there is a weakness there that he's got to be careful of. And if his teammates keep playing the way they are, it might not be a problem. Like fucking Flamey at this event got the first, surely it was like the first Galil ace in like 10 years. Yeah.
Like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Clean.
One magazine, all 5 kills. Yeah. Doesn't make any goddamn sense. But that's an area where Simple has been exploited in the past. That I mean, he often can get away with it because of his individual skill. But if I'm a team, I'm saying that's the weakness I'm trying to exploit with Simple.
Yeah, I think a greater weakness for Na'Vi though is that this kind of happens a lot at tournament, or like when you win a championship at a tournament, it's usually like your IGL overperforms, and Boomich was the second best player.
In the final, he did for sure. He had the most kills in the final.
Yeah, like things like that are just like we see it with like every now and then, like when the occasional time MSL wins a tournament, it's usually because he does really well. Like, yeah, his system's pretty good and everything like that, but to actually win championships for him regularly, it doesn't usually come down to, even though his tactics and structure are really good, he has to perform at a level that is beyond what he normally does.
Sure.
It's kind of like why Complexity, in my opinion, won or did as well as they did in their Blast group, is because actually it wasn't Blame F doing well, but it's kind of like underrated players.
Like Rush, for example, I think was like like the 4th highest rated player in the group.
Whoa.
Exactly.
Don't fuck with my boy Rush. Don't fuck with my boy Rush.
Listen, mate, you can have Rush and Kuster forever, mate. I'll just take Simple and Nico, like Device, whoever I've got on my team, Everyone assemble their teams.
I think Rush is, I think he really overperformed there. At Anaheim, I don't think, he didn't do as well, and then they didn't go as far, It's just like, things, when like lesser players are overperformed, then you have a chance to win championships.
And it's going to cover a lot of your weaknesses, isn't it? Like if one of the worst players in your team that has a great performance, he's going to look like you're flawless, of course, yeah.
Exactly. Which is what's scary, like, to go off topic with MIBR right now. Taco's playing the best he's ever played, and they suck. Like, they're really bad. So they're like wasting their usual bottom fraggers highest peak that I've ever seen. So
listen, I won't hear anything said against MIBR. At least a top 5 Flashpoint 1 team. Listen, I don't give a fuck. It's my own league, and it's still that's still just the reality. Of it.
Over here, all of a sudden with a go MIBR.
Exactly. That's the only way you could get me and MIBR aligned in the same mission.
We need to see them do better. Yeah.
Exactly. No, but I actually do. That's the problem with the Na'Vi win. Is like the Blast win was actually cool because it was like that Astralis series they had to win on Inferno and Nuke and you had to overcome stuff. And by the way, Astralis wasn't playing shit in that series. Like they had woken up, like that was where Simple had to go God mode for them to win.
Yeah.
The problem is like that type of win's great. That's what you call like, you know, the character win, etc. Like I say, as bizarre as this sounds, because think about it, if you're a newer fan to CS, you're going to think like what you're saying makes no sense intuitively at all. So the fact that they won too dominantly means that they're not going to be that good. How does that make any sense? Because I'll just say this. It's the same scenario that happened with FaZe a few years back. When FaZe had that New York event where they won every fucking pistol round, every force spy, every map, no maps even went, like there was one map went like to 14 rounds against them. Like it was unbelievable.
Didn't they have all 5 players in like the top 8 statistically?
Something mental, like exactly. Almost no flaw. Well, the problem with that is you can bank that those things won't happen again, unfortunately. Like the odds that are, like it's like I said, I had the best line for it at the time. I said, if it does happen again, it could, but that just means that everything I knew about Counter-Strike was wrong and that we have to start over with the new paradigm. So the odds that that's the case after, whatever, at this point in time, 17 years, it's quite unlikely. So I have to say, though, the really positive thing for Na'Vi is, I mean, it was already the case that they had good firepower anyway in the time of last year, but the firepower looks amazing in this team now. Like, you already know Simple and Electronic are going to be really good. You just think any of the others, if I get one good game, like Boomich, as he says, had a whole bunch of big games, especially some key maps that he's been huge on. Flamey obviously is, like everyone knows, you don't want to rely on Flamey, but if you don't have to, he's going to give you a massive game every now and then. Like what's weird is he only becomes underrated when people stop pretending he's a star player. If you just take him as an average player, he's actually a pretty legit player.
Problem was he was a star player earlier in his career. Like that's the issue. Is like,
he never really blossomed the way he was supposed to.
So I mean, maybe it's time to change the way we look at him as a player. But I mean, he started it all for like 2 years of being like the star bastard and Na'Vi. Like he was so good. Remember when was it Blade as the coach? This is going way back. Who was their coach at the time when he joined that team? Because the conversation around it was that the coach Starix, yeah, that's right. Was that Starix did all it was back when coaches could talk. So the conversation was Flamey just like goes like the Terminator and just runs around the map killing things.
That is when he was at his best as well, for real, yeah.
And Starix just does all of this calming. So it was I don't know, maybe it's time to change that the way we look at him, but like certainly like you know, you need a third player at some point, and Flamey as a third player is pretty solid, as you said.
Yeah, for sure.
Boomich has been pretty impressive as a third player, but it's a lot of it's like based off of just how much info he gives the rest of his team all the time. He's so good at just, you know, like I said,
listen, Glaive does that as well as an in-game leader, and he's another good fragging in-game leader. So listen, if you're copying a fucking Glaive style, you know, there's worse players to copy.
Is that the logic, by the way, of why he's using the MP9 then? Because that is an area that I haven't seen explored much. Like if you want to just peek for info only, and you're not going to kill them, you're just going to get out alive. SMG sounds perfect. You can run with those.
Yeah, he's a big
runner. The movement speed is so good. The movement speed's so high that it makes his jiggles like even stronger. It makes it so that if he has to run away and shoot, he can actually get some damage off at the very least. Like it gives you actually a lot of options out of having an M4 in those things. It's like the jiggle's slower. Like if I'm proposing like someone does do a contact off play against him, but his jiggles are really tight and they're really just like really fast too, and it actually help. It does help.
That's where the mind game, though, then becomes, like, you post up an AWP versus him, then the next round when your AWP's there, he jiggles, and when he picks back, his AWPer peeks out and kills your AWPer, trade kills, and then, you know, like, you're right, it will just become a mind game if you do it.
Remember the conversations, Duncan, that we used to have in the green room when we used to see like the SMG's prices lowered or like they were buffed, and we're just like, how long until like someone just like decides to play purely with an SMG just to run around and be a fucking asshole? Boomich is the epitome of all those conversations come to life. He's just reared his ugly head like the shit demon from fucking Dogma. Boomich is. The Golgothan.
That was a reference, you know.
It was a reference.
Well, I didn't catch that.
I'd look that one up. It's a bit harsh. That's all I'm going to say. So
the kids, these fucking.
No, the thing is though, like that, there are still areas like that for sure in Counter-Strike that people. It's because that's purely just the paradigm of how you think of the weapons and what you can do with them. For sure, there are still some spots like that. Like the famous example, obviously, a few years back was when MIBR and those people at the beginning of, I think it was 2017, when they all figured out you could use the UMP. When everyone was like, "Wait a minute, that game was in the game. That gun was in the game for years. Like no one was using it." But then it became, if you remember, because of like the bonus on the kills. You would just save that for like 2 rounds. You were just farming money and you had a mental economy out on like round 5 or whatever. So there's got to still be areas like that, like undiscovered areas of the game where there's actually a weapon that's more efficient than we realise.
Well, the Krieg is a prime example, right?
Yeah. I think the auto sniper probably has a place that we're not seeing right now. So that's...
There's got to be at least one spot on a map, surely, where it's really good.
Kerrigan made it look good at Aeon Mirage all the time. He would just
I think the biggest problem the auto sniper has is that the economy doesn't lend itself to growing a huge bank, right? Like you're really constantly you're going for fucking half buys every couple rounds. Like there's never a full fucking save.
If the T's didn't put so much pressure on the CT economy all the time right now, which seems to be the case, then the auto sniper might have a place. But as a gun itself, it's really good. But yeah, I do agree. $5,000, even more expensive. Why not just get an op sometimes, you know? Like, if you really wanted to run a double setup.
Even though I am actually completely with Moses in terms, like, I'm sick of getting burned predicting Navi's finally going to do it and become number 1 and then just stay number 3 or whatever and not do it, you know? So, like, there's a part of me is reticent, but after seeing the Katowice event, it's more the angle that you said before, where it's like if Astralis is this shaky, EG and Team Liquid look fucking bad right now compared to their old level. Like, Mouse Sports is still really good, but they themselves had not the greatest place in. Fnatic's still pretty good. Like, with the teams that are available at the top right now, Na'Vi could really make a strong fucking run. Like, I don't know if they can be number 1, but they could be right up top 2 at least.
In the ranking, they're like 4 points behind Astralis and HLTV or something. It's really close. And so just one more event or Astralis losing some form, just again, it's pretty much all
they're 4 points behind Astralis and about 80 points ahead of Mouse Sports.
Because here's the crazy thing about Counter-Strike, right, is, you know, when you have teams, so the 2 best examples, I think, for this is the old Ents team with Alexi B and the 100 Thieves team now. If anything, it actually makes no sense to me that these teams can ever be as highly ranked as they are. Like, I think at one point in time, 100 Thieves was like 5th in the world. Obviously, Ents was number 2 in the world. That makes no sense because when I look at the players, it shows how the game is about being more than the sum of your parts. Because the parts in those teams have no business being number 2. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's no way these guys are that good. The problem I have is it's really hard to look past the opposite version of that. So when you have Na'Vi, when you have Team Liquid, when you have EG, you just keep looking at the roster and your brain tells you, like, these teams should be better than they are. Like, you should be contended for number 1 with that lineup. Come on, man. Look how great. Because the problem is, you think to yourself, what happens in a game if 4 of those players turn up? Now, when Team Liquid did it in the summer, it's fucking amazing. The problem is, though, like, it almost is a rule of the game that you can't really have all 5 players frag out. It doesn't matter who they are. Like, it just doesn't work that often, if you notice.
I think mechanics come and go a little faster than people recognize. It's like, I think when Ents was peaking, like, a lot of their players would have 100 hours in the past 2 weeks if you look at their Steam things. Now they have, like, I saw Sergey show up to an event with, like, 50 hours in the past 2 weeks. Like, dude, that's not... I'm like that. There's just gonna be
Really?
like that's not gonna be good enough.
I heard
like,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not like when Simple has like always 100 hours in the past 2 weeks. His form is gonna be very consistent, and I think people undervalue maybe how many hours they're. I can't believe they do, but I know they do. Like because
no, the reason you know they do, Mauisnake, is you know those famous stories where you hear that like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant would just shooting jump shots for hours and hours in the gym, right?
Yeah.
Like the reason why those sound whack is because you think to yourself, well, of course you are. You're a professional basketball player. But what people don't realize about why those are like legendary stories is there are tons of professional basketball players who don't work on the basics. They don't work on their footwork. They don't work on their free throws. They think like, fuck it, I'm a pro. I can already do it. Like, I for sure there's pro players doing that in CS.
Oh,
the 100%. Between like Jason Tatum this year shooting 40% from 3 and Curry shooting 45% is like those hours, and it's what makes like one player a transcendent shooter versus a player that's just like, okay, maybe he's like he's like cusp superstar, but maybe not.
Sure.
You know, kind of. Yeah. So those hours matter. They make that one extra shot that puts you over the edge to win a game. That's it. That one duel. in Counter-Strike.
Which is, by the way, why it's going to be hard to convince a guy who isn't like super driven to do it. If you tell him you're only going to get a 2% advantage to your game, he's going to think, well, fuck it, why bother? But it's like, if you're actually a winner, that 2% is everything. That really is the championship, maybe.
One shot can make one round different, and that can reset someone's economy, and that's it. So mechanics, I think for Liquid, to bring it back to CS, is just, I think people maybe undervalued how good Nitro was performing when they were doing really well. Like, he was insane. He was like, I felt like he was the reason that their overpass was as strong as it was. He was multi-fragging on A every single round with the op during their run, and it was like, okay, this looks so easy, and yet he doesn't do it anymore. So I'll
tell you something really depressing. This is going to depress the fuck out of anyone who's a Liquid fan. I'm going to say it anyway. Right? When I've told this story before, that when we were at the major and they just had their boot camp, which had gone terribly, and if you talk to them, like Moses, you remember this, they themselves didn't sound confident. Like they thought they were going to win the major. Like, even before they'd lost, they were talking as though, like, yeah, things aren't that great. Like, as though they were, like, I get that if you did lose, that you just accept reality, but they were doing it before they'd even lost to Astralis yet, right? Well, one of the things along with that always underwhelmed me when they were the number one team is they used to think their map pool was worse than I did. Because I was like, what are you talking about? Look who you've beaten on this map here. You've beaten this team, this team, this team. These are all good teams on Overpass or Dust 2 or whatever. And for a couple of the maps in the pool where they had really good win rates, they would be like, nah, I don't think we're that good on, say, Nuke, for example. And one of the reasons why I think that they were doing it is, to me, they were good because what I actually saw in the server, the finished product, were easily matched up against the best teams and was winning games. But I think the problem is, because they were fragging out so hard, I think deep down they know that some of those rounds, like, and if they'd had equal skill to the opponent, they wouldn't have won them. Like, they didn't necessarily know how to play the map better. Yeah, exactly.
If you go, I mean, I know Chad and I were laughing a little bit when that Liquid Frag movie came out from their Grand Slam run came out, and you just like watch all the highlights.
It's mental, isn't it?
Kills, all the quad kills. It was just like, what the fuck? Like, there's first of all, there's no way you're replicating that. Like, no one's going to be winning 1 versus 3s, 1 versus 4 at that rate, constantly. I mean, that was, I will say this about Liquid, and you're right, it is their worst feature as a team. And I've like, I hope this isn't one of those words you can't say, but they are mental midgets. They they just do not have the ability to stay self-confident in themselves. And it's unbelievable for a team that has this much skill. And it can't be a thing any longer. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's a personality thing among the players. I don't know if they need to bring in some kind of crazy, like super expensive sports psychologist and just sit everyone down. But they have real issues with their ability to have confidence in themselves. And that is the thing holding them back more than tactics, more than individual ability, more than any boot camp. It is the fact that they just don't have confidence in themselves. And it's very apparent when you talk to them outside of the games. It's very apparent when you listen, when you read what they say in interviews or when you hear their interviews. This is an issue for Team Liquid. And until they solve it, they are not going to be good.
Yeah, I think they all just need to honestly just DM for like 10 hours a day before a big tournament, do a couple uppers, and then just like show up just completely hyped out of their minds. And then and at that point, you just like,
CPL 2003, I think we saw it before Moses. Yeah, go back to the old NA strat, exactly.
Good old Crystal Meth Squad. Let's go.
Yeah, just go full autopilot, just run and aim it, no brain, and it's just like, okay, that's you can have confidence in that a little bit. And just instead of like Karate Kid learning from like some Mr. Miyagi, like wise Japanese guy, instead you just go to some old school SoCal POG player and you just say to him, how do I learn the secret? He's like, right, first of all, here's your medicine. Right, there you go. Now get in DM for 5 hours. After that, we're playing Astralis. Right? Fucking hell. Give me a break. What would you actually do though, Mauisnake? If you were in a scenario like, if someone just said tomorrow, right, you control the Team Liquid squad, so you can choose. These are your options. You change the coach, you change your player, you change your role in the team. What would be the first one you'd do? What would you want to do to change? Because like if you were the GM, if you were the coach, it looks like a straight fire roster on paper. So are you keeping it? Are you changing someone? What would you want to do? I think that their problem right now is that they don't have a strong opper, actually. I think that Nitro was the lowest rated at the event. Stewie, who picks it up, also was like kind of middle of the pack, I think. So if you look at teams like 100 Thieves, for example, they could be so much better if Gratisfaction were just good. Like he's not that good, right? Like as a top 10 as an opera on a top 10 team, he's probably the weakest. I think Nitro might be second weakest. And so what you need to do is you either just tell Nitro, dude, just don't worry about strats as much, and we'll pick up the mantle, like have a Dren help him a lot more with strats and have Nitro do it less so that he can focus on his mechanical skill a little bit more. Or you just straight up have to replace somebody, and it's so hard to pick from that roster because in terms of emotional energy, you don't want to get rid of Stewie, and in terms of kind of like entry, he's an entry fragger, like he's not always going to have the best stats. Elige you cannot replace. So then it's almost between like Twist and Naf. And it's just so hard to even look at those two players and be like, yeah, we should get rid of one of these for an
By the way,
who's probably not as good.
To speak to that, this is what's so brutal, is over the last 4 months, if you had to make the choice you just said, you'd take Naf. But then you look at Katowice and Twists was bagging out of control, he's right back again, like...
Yeah, exactly.
Now I don't know how you make that shot. That's some Sophie's Choice level shit, by the way, where you have to choose between fucking Twists or Naf. Not least because the worst part about that choice is even if it ended up being the right choice for your team, you're now giving one of your NA rivals one of the best players in the fucking region. Like that can come back to bite you so badly.
Yeah, you don't want to face him in a server either. That's why I just think that someone else maybe has to. I almost would be like Stewie should IGL because he's entry fragging anyways. He's getting a lot of info. He can almost play that glaive role.
Here's the thing. You know what's mad, Mauisnake? After listening to their comms, I would be down for that move. Like if Nitro literally is just the primary op and that's all he does in the team, and Stewie is the actual IGL, I feel like the style of play Stewie wants to play is probably better than the way they play now. Because the worst thing about Team Liquid when they do badly is they slow the game right the fuck down, and that's not what you want to do with these players.
It's so
like with these players, you want to hit like a Mac truck. You want it to be duels and aim fights all the time. Because at the end of the day, if Astralis has to fight you literally one gun versus one gun over and over again, you're going to win a lot of those battles.
Yeah, exactly. And like there was a round against Navi where I think it was someone that was their Palace player. I think it might have been Naf or something. It was in Palace with a Krieg. And then two Navi players, I think it was Flamey and Boomich, just pushed Palace and died. And what Liquid did, instead of just kind of running onto A at that point, was they just held, they let Navi set up a really good defense and get info, and then they hit A late, and they lost to a simple 1v2 clutch, the one where he was on, like, trying to defuse default. There were two players firebox to his right, and he killed both of them. Like, they just slowed the round so much that kind of play could happen, but if they just gunned out, ran and took control, like, which I assume Stewie would be like, yo, just go away, go now, like, you got 2 kills, like, that's usually in Counter-Strike meta, like, 2 and take, 1 and fake, like, it's just, you do something like that, and there's no chance that, like, Simple can get back in that round, there's no chance that Navi can set up their defense, and then get info, and then just pretty much, everyone's already set, all 3 players on Navi were pretty much set for the 5-man A take that Liquid ended up going for. There just needs to be a little bit more just pizzazz to the way they play, and I think that Stewie IGL would bring that.
I think a lot of that goes down back to the confidence, because I think that's the Liquid that you saw previously, where I think this Liquid is almost like so at the moment, like their hands are just tied by the fact that they haven't been playing well, that they're back to being very much like all their decisions are very cerebral and thought out. Like if they have an opening to take, they're just thinking in their head, is this what we practice? Is this the strategy? Is this how we do this? Is this the right way? Instead of having the initiative, or instead of wanting to be the player who like kind of steps out and goes and finds out the information, which we'd see in the past. For me, this team, I would hesitate, and I personally am not ready. Like if I'm the GM of Liquid, I'm not making a roster change. The first thing I'm doing is I'm sitting Elige down and I'm saying, you need to be more of a leadership role in terms of your being vocal, in terms of being an energy source right next to Stewie. I want my star player to be an example for the rest of the team. I'm moving a Dren to an analyst or assistant coach or whatever you want to call it, who's going to help formulate the strategy and who's going to help formulate the game plan and focus a lot on details. And I'm hiring a coach who's going to fix the mentality, fix the communication issues. And that's what I'm going to focus on to the major, and I'm going to reassess after that when there's, definitely going to be more opportunities for roster changes.
Yeah, I feel like their strategies are sound enough that they can rely on those to win tournaments. It's just that, like we've been saying, it's just that their emotions are not.
I don't even think you need good strategies at this point in Counter-Strike to win tournaments. Like you don't. Like you might need, you need a good. You don't even need strategies to set up an era. You need like good teamwork. You need good team play. You need to have strategies, But what we're seeing out of teams like Navi at the moment and Mouse Sports over the past, like no one's going to say these teams are tactically gifted. No one's going to say these teams are strategic masterminds. So, I mean, you have players that can play very well together on like a micro scale, on like 2-player groups or 3-player groups who can trade very effectively. And that's going to get you deep into tournaments with the skills on this team.
I used to think that Counter-Strike was more like football because it's like there's a play time, they call it, the coach calls a play, they run the strategy and everything like that. I'm actually starting to see it more like hockey or like basketball because it's just like teams now kind of have like philosophies and they kind of just stick to the loose philosophy to their team. And a lot of times we don't even see like when a lot of people get into the game, they see like execs or like, strats or like these really set defaults and things like that. But nowadays it's just like, the default just kind of like gets you into loose positions, and then you just have to play off of each other, communicate, and then just come up with more information on the fly and get yourself into something that you think is
set pieces are actually feel pretty rare to me. Like they happen on certain maps more than others, obviously, but usually it's if someone gets picked off early and you just don't want to risk another player and you just go for a set piece.
4v5 exact.
Yes, and otherwise, if you do like a 5-on-5 set piece, it happens maybe like twice a half, maybe.
It's like to just reinstill a little bit of confidence, and like I think Kerrigan uses set pieces really well still, where he will occasionally call it because it's like his default just failed twice in a row, so it's like, all right,
or gets a double op, do a set piece, get into this.
Yeah, exactly. Just make sure that all our bases are covered, that all these flashes and smokes are going to cover off the normal angle.
That's also what you were saying earlier. Like, first of all, I definitely agree about like. It's more about, like, I think what the key thing is, it's not who the IGL is, it's what the philosophy of the team is based on the personnel you have. Because, like, the classic example I was thinking of when you were saying that is, like, when those Brazilian teams were on top. They won all those tournaments off fucking winning a million 2v2s where they would just both play off each other and do exactly the right thing. But it's not that they did exactly the right thing, it's that they both knew what each other was going to do. If we're working together on something, and we both know what we want to do, what our response to something, we're going to have a way better chance than if we're just responding in the moment freely. And the problem with Team Liquid is they're not the team that's great at that sort of stuff, unfortunately.
I couldn't believe how in denial MIBR was when they first formed that kind of Stewie Tarek roster. It's like, dude, you guys...
Oh, they thought they were going to do that. By the way, here's the crazy thing, dude. Mauisnake, right? After hearing the Team Liquid comms, and I've said this on the past shows, they had the worst comms of everyone at Blast. After hearing their comms, I genuinely think MIBR, bearing in mind they can't get good Brazilian players, should go international again. Because it wasn't that the international squad is what made them fail. It's that if you have Stewie 2K and Tarek, listen, no disrespect to those people, but they're not super cerebral thinkers, and their comms are fairly limited. They're not going to be the best examples to see whether you can play in a national team. Like, I actually get the sense that when Fallen and Fern, those guys got those players, they were literally just sitting like, the fuck? This is how they play? Like, holy shit! Like, they're not common anything. Like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, because it was such a culture clash of how you play the game.
To defend my boys a little bit here, I think since that whole situation, we have discovered that the rift between Coldzera and the rest of the Brazilians was a little bit deeper.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he wanted to leave already. That's true.
Yeah, that certainly played into that, I think. But
I don't think they were a perfect pairing in that sense.
Liquid's comms were dog shit at Blast.
Yeah, they were pretty bad.
Wait, question for Thorin. When you guys were on the Blast desk, could you hear all their comms all the time?
What happens is we hear it in a booth in the back. Like, only the analysts go in there, and we're allowed to pick what we listen to. So anyone who speaks English, I can just listen the whole time. Sick.
Dude.
Fucking sick, man. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh my God. I would learn so much.
But it's that's the reason why I kept stressing over and over again that Alexi B is like legit as fuck as an IGL. I was hearing the comms he was making that when he win the round off it.
When Blast would show the last round, that like the whole winning round or something like that, like it made Complexity seem like gods because Rush's comms were so freaking good. Like they were like, yo, doing jump flash. Okay, you're gonna have to turn from this. Okay,
he would basically comm sometimes for Poison because as far as I know, Poison was like one of the most silent players. So
yeah, I could imagine that. I think Obo's interview was like, Poison has an English coach right now or something. That dude's not talking that well. Like for sure.
No, the thing is though, he definitely can speak English. I think he just doesn't in the game. I think he's just one of those AWPers who just tunnel visions.
Okay.
He's very inexperienced in games like that. When I spoke to Rush about it, he was like, I just kind of do it as a helping hand, and he kind of laughed as well because he thinks to a certain degree like he probably does it too much. So I mean, they're still kind of that's a very new team together as well, right? With international languages, they're still figuring out how those comms are going to work. But that's Rush was super vocal throughout all of Complexity's games.
To bring it back though, like because basically, one thing I definitely agree with as a premise is. Right, I think the biggest problem Team Liquid has had, the whole time is that the team that has beaten them almost every fucking time now is Astralis, right? So they do that mistake, and I think this is a huge mistake, and you guys were killing it with that point, which is they think to themselves, right, we have to look at what Astralis is doing, and we have to be like Astralis to beat them. It's like, no, if anything, Mouse Spots, like, this is what kills me about Team Liquid right now. If I sat someone from Team Liquid down, and I said to them, you are aware, right? I don't think a single player on Mouse Spots is better than his equivalent player on your team. Like, even if you say Rops is the best on the team, Elijah's better at what he does. Right, we'll go except maybe Woxic as an AWPer, because the AWPer in the Team Liquid isn't the strongest, right? So what I would tell them is, do you think they're just playing like Astralis? They can't. They don't even have, like, they're all speaking second language English. Like, they're in the very limited set of circumstances, but they've got exactly the best style for their team you could get. They've got everyone in positions that make sense, and they're doing what they can with it. So if I'm Team Liquid, you're not trying to beat Astralis playing Astralis' game. That's a terrible concept.
Mouse is just so good at putting, like, 2-3 guys. It's like they always have a setup, or they always have some way to play off of each other that they've drilled or something like that. Like, Astralis is a lot more free-flowing. Mouse, it feels like they already, as soon as they get into a spot, it's like they know the crossfires and they know who's taking first contact without even have to saying anything. I mean, I'm sure they do, but, like, you know, they're just so quick to it, and it's like, we've seen the situation before. You set up here, I set up here, I got this, you get this.
Like what you said before, the example you gave was great, that Mirage example, where they could basically have just burst onto the A site or whatever instantly and forced like a response, and the team wouldn't have rotated in time. Instead, they tried to play like Astralis. They were like, right, sit back, we're all going to lurk on the map, and we're all going to read the opponent. Like, mate, that's actually the hardest style of play. Like, people don't get this. Astralis' style, what makes them the GOATs, is they are playing the hardest style of Counter-Strike to play. You have to basically be flawless. If you fuck up with the really slow Counter-Strike, the whole round just falls apart and you get nothing out of it. It's way easier to do a brainless rush and just headshot some people. Like, that can work a lot better. There's so many less variables to account for.
Astralis just seems like they know if they get a pick anywhere, they know exactly where people are going to be, what kind of info the other team's probably going to try to get, and how to punish that. And yeah, they just play off of each other, and it's like, oh, micro situation happened between two players. It's like, they're going to throw a perfect flash for them too on top of that. So it's just like, Liquid, they're really just not as good with all their utility like Astralis. Astralis also just has godly. Everyone on Astralis is a godly nade thrower. Like, they can always flash for someone perfectly.
I actually wouldn't agree with that, just because I think if you, I mean, I agree with the point about Astralis. I think Liquid is probably just as good with utility, but where they lack again is the communication. I think if this is going to be the conversation about Liquid, I think their comms are so bad that, you know, they just don't always set up the same utility that Astralis does. I think their comms get hectic. I think they get very emotional. If I understood Danish and I listened to Astralis comms, I bet it sounds fucking great. I bet it sounds like a casual conversation in a quiet bar.
I think Semler said, because obviously knowing Swedish, you can understand it a little bit. I think he said it. They always just sound super chilled out. Like, they just make a comment saying, someone come in banana, I'm going to rotate off. Like, it just sounds like they're bored.
That's why they can be so consistent, though. They don't have to ride highs to get into positions and things. They just are to win tournaments. It's just another.
Well, here's a question with Astralis and Liquid and EG, and specifically those three who ended the year 1, 2, and 3. I think in 2019, didn't they end at the top, or no? Mouse Sports overtook one of them, or they were up there. Anyways, three of them were in the top 5. We've now seen them at Blast. We've now seen them at Katowice, and all of them have been underwhelming in some regard relative to where we expect them across both of those events. How much longer do they get? What was Katowice the last kind of grace period, and now if they suck at EPL, it's like, what the fuck?
Well, here's the thing. This is what's spicy, and nobody wants to think about this, right? When I made that tweet right after Katowice, where I said, we actually have to have the serious question now and ask, can Astralis win the major? Obviously, I didn't mean that literally, because that's a worthless question. Anyone can, in theory, win. Like, the whole point of that was, like, at this point in time, I don't even know that Astralis is the number one favorite for the major if the major started tomorrow. Like, I think right now it's a really open field, and it's pretty much like dealer's choice. You pick whatever the fuck you want.
If it started right now, Astralis, I don't think wins the major. But because they know a major's coming, they always have a really good prep cycle. They do tons of homework. They research all their opponents. They know tendencies. They know how to break down. They'll learn how to break down late rounds.
But here's the question that we're going to put to you, though, Mauisnake. Right? This almost happened last year. I've said this story before, but I genuinely believe if Team Liquid had either won that quarterfinal at the major against Astralis, or Astralis had lost earlier, like, Crazy almost beat them, for example. I actually believe if they'd have done badly at that major, that it wouldn't have been long before they've had a roster move, because that then would have been like 5 or 6 months without a win, barely any finals. Like, you've gone through a hard period. There's players in the team who even have extenuating circumstances outside of the game that might mean one of them retires or takes a year off. Like, no team can go without changing players forever, like especially really competitive ones. So that basically, to tie into what Moses was saying there, if they don't, right, obviously the next event's Pro League for them, then it's the major, right? Let's say Astralis don't win either of these tournaments. So they start the year off with like 5 months with no tournament wins. In fact, I think that might even be like a run with no finals appearances even. Do you think they make a roster move? I mean, they have to think about it eventually, right? It seems unthinkable, but it's not once they start losing. It really isn't.
I don't think they would, simply because I feel like here's the problem. If you're going to make one roster change from Astralis, you're still thinking that you're competing for titles and you're going to win, and that would mean you want to go for Valda, right? And you have to imagine he's pretty fucking locked down on OG. Like, you'd at least have a massive buyout. Like, if you're only going to I feel like if you make a change as Astralis, right, you have to be like replacing like 2 players, and you have to dip down and try and get some players that you know are going to be the future. You have to get a little bit, younger and try and see what you can build up. But I don't think they'd do it.
I don't think they could, because if you get a young player, his comms aren't going to be good, and they thrive because their comms are exceptional. And if you had to look at anyone, it always feels like when people say like maybe Astralis is going to make a move, who would they replace?
It'd have to be Dupree or Zip.
And at this point, it's just like Zip has earned so much stake on this team for so many just mind-blowing clutches time and time again and through history that it's really hard to just be like, yeah, we just don't need our best clutcher kind of guy. Because, I mean, we see, I don't know, if teams get rid of their best clutcher, it's like, it's just like late round situations become so much more like, who do we actually rely on? Because at the end of the round, if Zip is in a 1v2, I'm pretty sure Astralis just think they have a good chance of winning it. And that security of mind and then seeing it sometimes is just like, it does a lot for a team's mental, I think. So it would be Dupree, I guess. Yeah.
That'd be interesting to watch. I think Dupree would even be like a really hard like that. I mean, he might not be like the best player, but he certainly had amazing stretches. But more than anything, I think he's just like a big piece of, like, as cheesy as this sounds, he is in a way the heart of that team. Like, think of all, the shit he's been through, at the last Katowice and everything, and the way he's been with this team. And yeah, at a certain level in a competition and in a business, you can't really think about that. But I think I still think esports is in that mode where it'd be very, very tough to part with Dupree in that sense.
Right, let's do this now then. We'll do the little giveaway thing now, and then we've got like the last half an hour. We'll just talk about some other teams, then we'll pivot. So what we're going to do, Mauisnake, well, I have prepped you on this before the show, so you're aware of all this, but this is for the fans, right? So since CS Money is sponsoring the show, and obviously their skin marketplace, blah, 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 all the rest of it, right? They have skins to give away. So we're going to do this thing, right, where Mauisnake can potentially win a skin. The only problem with that is, how do I find out what skin it was? I don't know. We'll find out whatever it is. Like, maybe they give you the skin that we're actually doing in the question. I don't know. Anyway, this will be better next week. But on this week, he wins Mystery Skin X that I don't know yet, but he will win a skin if he gets the answer right. If he gets the answer wrong, then everyone watching who wants to win the skin must rush to the comments, type in the name of the answer, the correct answer, and I'll just pick one at random in like a week from whenever I publish this. I'll pick someone who just did the right answer. So basically, you should all right now be pulling for Mauisnake not to know this answer. But I'll actually say it's not as easy as you think. Like, I didn't come up with these questions, but whoever did, they're legit questions. Here's the question, right, Mauisnake? If you get it wrong, we'll just move on. It's fine. Okay. Here's the question, right? Do not help him, Moses. You get one answer as well. It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You got a final answer. What skin...
I'm going to phone a friend.
Are you ready? What skin was named after the designer who worked on Aliens, Blade Runner, and the Tron movies? So the name of the skin is his name. Do you know it? Do not Google it. What is the name of the skin?
Well, it's like, it would be like Ridley Scott, but I don't know.
That's the director. It's the designer, though. If you know the name, it's a British name, yeah. You're not 100% that off, obviously. Can you guess?
No, I don't know. I don't know who designed the Alien. I just know Ridley Scott directed.
Right, we're just going to leave it at that. Everyone who's listening, you now have a chance to win whatever this skin is. Find out who it is. So it was the designer who worked on Aliens, Blade Runner, and the Tron movies, and it's the name of a skin. So it was named after him. So go and no one's going to, don't tell them, Moses, but they'll have to find it and put it in the chat. So that's the end of that segment, right? Let's just pivot. Let's pivot from what we said before, because the problem with the Astralis one is, just in terms of likelihood, yes, it's very unlikely that Astralis would actually make a player change. In fact, their success means almost certainly they'll just delude themselves that they'll do another comeback like they did last year and that it'll still be worth it. And I mean, most great lineups keep the lineup together too long because you keep thinking you can turn it around and that, you know, you can win with the old team. But it's more interesting if we just pivot the same question, Mauisnake. As he just said, we did Liquid. How about EG? If EG doesn't do well at these next two events, I think you have to start thinking about a roster move.
Yeah, I wouldn't even rule that out at all, like anytime soon.
The problem is though, I still don't know who you do though. I don't know who you take out. Like these are hard rosters to change.
Yeah.
I think EG is a little bit easier than Liquid.
Who are you taking out that team then?
I actually, this is one of those ones I feel bad even saying because I feel, I would do Tarek. And it's not even that I necessarily think, I mean, he hasn't played well. He had that really rough stretch of events to end last year. It's not even necessarily about his play. It's that, you know, Breeze, Ethan, Cirque, you can't touch them. No. And I don't think you'd want to remove an in-game leader with this team and just turn it into a full-blown pug. Unless you're finding some like god tier in-game leader or some experienced in-game leader, I think it's gotta be Tarek.
FNS, it was his master plan all along. He literally got them to build him a super team, and he takes over.
What if they bring Daps back? What if they went that route? That would be fucking epic.
Yeah,
that was a joke. Everybody laughed.
But,
no, but here's the sad thing. You know what's sad? You could actually have a discussion about that. You could.
No, you would do a swap right now where you put Stanislaw on Gen G, you would put Daps on EG, and then you'd switch them back, and everyone would win. Like that's like the case right now. Because EG always needs a little bit. EG kind of does need a little bit more structure, which Daps would bring, but then their ceiling would be like as low as basically having a bottom fragger guaranteed every game. So you bring back Stanislaw, better fragging IGL, runs similar systems that you had before. But you just have like a person instead of Daps who can still run Daps' system, but just not like.
What if I guess maybe there's like a. I mean, this is kind of like being the riding the line, I guess, and being a little bit more diplomatic. But what if you like went to Daps and you were like, hey, about a year and a half ago, you made that big post about wanting to transition into being a coach. You still interested? Come back and create some structure from the coaching role, and we still got to keep our frag balls. To
I will say,
players.
I'm a Pet is another person where this is no disrespect to him as a person. He does his great job as far as I can tell as an analyst. He is in all those demos, studying them all, figuring it all out. But again, from hearing him in timeouts and knowing him to some degree as a person, he's not like a head coach material in that sense, I don't think. So I wouldn't mind in that sense just moving him to analyst and bringing on Daps in that sense.
I think a lot of Counter-Strike in general, analysts and coaches, this is like a big call out. I don't think people know how to manage emotions very well. I definitely didn't when I was playing lower, and like being around this game, you do get really hyper analytical. This is like kind of the nature of competitive gaming in general, that you are just going to keep thinking about iterations. People love to theory craft on forums and things like that, but then you don't have that like real life sport just like emotion where you see the look on your players, you see like their faces, and you're like, okay, they're pretty downtrodden right now. How do I uplift them? You just got to say some bullshit. You just got to be like, dude, let's fucking go. Or like, these guys suck. Or like, whatever. Like, that's why sometimes you need like hype players on your team. But having a hype coach, it just seems like it never happens in the scene anymore. Yeah, like, I'm just thinking of all the coaches. Like, I never seen
the best coach in the world, does it?
Blades, yeah, okay, so Zonic does, like, he gives so much like positive reinforcement with his like nice meaty bear hand like or shoulder rubs and things like that. But like, you look at Blade's face, it pretty much never changes. Adren's face just looks worried all the time. Like, I haven't seen any coaches where they're like, Yanko actually is doing a pretty good job. I heard him yelling at Katowice when they were playing Navi and stuff like that, but I'm not sure. Like, everyone.
Yanko's like a coach in a player's body.
Put it this way. There's a reason why, even though I said my number one pick when me and Sponge did the blast backstage, if we were changing the culture Liquid, my number one pick would be Kassad, because I think he ticks all the boxes. I actually think he's better than people realise. But my number two pick would actually have been Yanko. And the reason why is completely unironically, Yanko would literally just call a timeout. It's not a joke, and tell one of the Team Liquid players, "You are being a little pussy. Like, be a fucking man." Like, he would actually do that for real,
dude. That's and
that might be necessary. That really might be what they need, you know.
Yeah. I think that is actually way.
I think some of them would even respond to it, you know. Like, the thing I've also noticed is you sometimes have players who are a bit more quiet, but it's almost like they don't know how to be an extroverted person, so they almost like don't feel permission to do it. I could even see some of those guys. They might like feed off that. They might like someone pushing them a little bit and call them out a little bit, you know. Like, I know over the years, obviously people know I've had a relationship with Elige, been friends with him, etc. I think he's someone who, and to some degree, if you're on point, like obviously if you're talking bullshit, he doesn't agree with you, he's not going to enjoy it. But if you make a point like you played bad in this game in this way, if you have a point to what you're saying, guys like that appreciate feedback. Like, they know they want to get better, they want to be the best. So the problem is, you can find a million people out there who'll kiss your ass and tell you you're really good and you're the best NA player or whatever. But it's actually hard to find people who'll push you in the right way, put a fire under you, you know.
Yeah. I to bring it a little back to EG though, with Imapet, like, they're really analytical, and he's really analytical and everything like that, but something I noticed at Epicenter, and I still kind of notice it, is it feels like their initial game plans in a lot of games are just not right. Like, they'll start 5 rounds down a lot, or they'll just, you know, they might lose the pistol, but they also lose the first gun round. They have to dig themselves out of these huge holes. So
yeah,
I don't. Yeah.
Go on.
Here's the problem, though. That's why Stanislaw gets the massive rep he gets, though, because then if he does some sick call,
he makes adjustments.
Then he looks like a genius. But the problem is, like you said, I agree. If you're as good as their team is, you shouldn't be in a hole that often. You should have just normal games where it looks boring. You just win the game, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
My problem is
to be a game of adjustments. It should be like, impose your game plan on them that works. But so often it's like, oh, your adjustment's really good. Like, you got to start.
I think part of that too. I mean, I'm not going to contest, you know, the game plan or the slow starts idea, like due to tactics or whatever it might be. I mean, this is just kind of a trend with me and North American teams. I think North American teams don't have any kind of good mentality because we've always struggled with leadership. And I think Evil Genius is a team that comes into matches probably not fully focused on who they're playing and on the game itself. And listen, I know if any of them hear this, they're probably going to contest it, and that's fair play. But this is a team that I just feel like probably doesn't get super focused and motivated until they're down by 5 or 6 rounds. Like, oh shit, here we go. Like, I don't get the sense when I see them before the game that they're like, like if I walk by like Astralis, you know, I can tell that they're focused on the game at hand. If I walk by, you know, Navi or Fnatic, I can tell that they're getting ready for the game. If I walk by EG and Team Liquid, you know, there is a little bit of like a jovial atmosphere. There is a little bit of, you know, the team's not all together, not discussing what's coming up. And I think those teams could really use someone to come in and be a little bit more professional and set up some kind of a more professional competitive environment in their pre-match rituals. Like, listen, I know one of the favorite talking points about Liquid at the moment is looking at that blast footage and watch them climbing out of the van with like their girlfriends. And it's like, if I'm on Team Liquid, if I'm the coach, if I'm the GM, I'm just like, fuck off. Like, you're not bringing your girlfriends to this van. Like, we're about to play a game in an hour. There's no discussion going on in this van about how, unless it's about how we're going to wreck this team we're playing against, unless it's talking about how we're going to set up strategies, unless it's talking about who we're working together and how we're going to play this game. I don't want to hear any talk outside of the match we're about to play. And that's just the way it is.
Even Glaive grew out of that. He was bringing his girl on stage.
There we go.
Oh, the reference?
That's not bad. Yeah, not bad. Checks out.
Yeah.
But I think that's a huge issue. Yeah, go on.
I've also heard just testimony from players on these North American teams, Adren or whatever, in interviews that are like, we're just bad at pistols. But then you look at their win rate and it's like 50% plus. Why do you think you're bad?
Fuck off. Like, being bad at pistols hasn't lost you a series in like a year and a half. Like, pistols have increasingly become less and less.
Yeah, when I talked to Stanislaw, because we took the same van or whatever from Epicenter to get to the airport, and he just was like, yeah, we're in those holes because we're bad at pistols and we're bad at starting games sometimes. I'm like, what is this? Like, why is that a mentality that you've just kind of accepted at this point? Like, it's like, why don't NA players who are so gifted in their mechanics and aim they should all think they're pistol gods. Like, they should believe that. And if you believe that, I mean, it's gonna just net some results regardless of it, whether or not like it changes your strategies or anything.
I think EG fell into that trap last year where they really And I mean, I can understand why they fell into it because there is some truth to the jet lag being very difficult to handle because they did have that crazy schedule that we've touched on a number of times. But they fell into the trap of thinking that was their only issue. Yes. They fell into the trap of thinking that, they would have won or gone deeper in some of these events if it weren't for the jet lag, when in fact that was just masking, them saying it was jet lag was just masking.
It was just the most obvious problem. Yeah. They had a lot of other problems with that for sure. Yeah.
So I mean that's a huge issue with them is that lack of like self criticism, that lack of self awareness. That like you always think it's just going to be the jet lag, and once you fix that, it's just leaning too much onto the excuse. And it's not that it's not even a fair excuse. I think jet lag's a perfectly fine excuse, but if it's your excuse every time you're getting knocked out through a 3-month stretch, that's a fucking issue.
Another problem I have with EG as a team as well is, put it this way, this might sound weird considering in the last 5 months, in theory, EG's had more success than Team Liquid. They've won more championships. Team Liquid always was second or top 4 or whatever. But I actually think that the construction of the teams, Team Liquid and EG, Team Liquid's is way better. Because in Team Liquid, like, Elige pretty much always performs. Then it's like, is Naf or Twist going to come on? Like, you kind of know where you're going to get what from the team. One of the worst things about EG for me is, except for when Tarek was playing really badly, none of the players does their job terribly, but they are so erratic as to where their performances come from. Like, I never know when I'm going to get the massive 30 frags from Ethan. I don't know when Breeze is going to have a throwback series where he's fucking amazing. Cirque generally, I think, is fairly consistent, but even then his style of play, it's hard to be very consistent when you're like a super fast flicking AWPer. So one of the problems I have with their team is I'm not surprised they're sort of lost as to where they are as a team, because how is anyone supposed to predict what performance level you're going to get from them? It's all over the place. There's got to be one of them where, of all the teams in the world, think of a team with star players that are that erratic. I can't think of one.
No, yeah, I have to agree.
Like Mouse Sports, you kind of know what's going to go off.
I would say Mouse Sports before that streak of finals they made.
Sure.
Yeah. Hoxic has been a little inconsistent, but he did pretty well at IEM recently, so I wouldn't even...
But I know what you mean by that too, and I think that's why teams look at them and say they need more, or that's why analysts look at them and say they need more tactical or strategic depth. And maybe it's not even that, but they need some kind of organization that allows consistency. Like, it is that whole mantra of like discipline is freedom, where, once you kind of know how everyone's going to do, once you know how the system is going to work, then you find where you can have that freedom as an individual player. And I don't think they have any of that discipline or any of that structure to lean on as an individual. Everything feels like, as they go, like a new person is clearing left or a new person's clearing right, or, turning this corner, or, they don't have those kind of, I don't know, they just don't seem to have any kind of organization that would allow an individual player outside of Breeze, because he is just kind of, halfway to God tier, to have any kind of consistency or any kind of like, match to match consistency in that sense around him. There's no consistency around a player. There's no consistency in the player itself. Do you want to, for maybe our last topic, because we have 10 to 15 minutes, do you want to touch on Alex leaving Vitality?
Yeah, let's do it. Like, because here's the thing. I don't know if you're aware of this, Moses, but you are in the presence of a fellow Vitality hater, because Mauisnake also thinks that Vitality is mad overrated. Like, This is what's funny. Even though we worked at Epicenter event, which they won the event and we're ahead of Mouse and Na'Vi and EG, all these top-ranked teams, like, it's mad, because normally, like when Na'Vi just won this event, normally you ride the hype of whoever won the event, like, oh, they're going to be big things, going to do great. Like, I think what's mad is it's one of the only events I've heard where everyone was just hating on the winner. Like, yeah, they'll never do that shit again. That was one-off. Like, they shouldn't even have won. So come on, Mauisnake, where do you come down on this one? Because obviously, of the players in the team, it's not like Alex is the player you wanted kicked out, but it's going to be a big change now, mate.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been the player I wanted out, because Alex was actually, as a player, their second best. So, or second most impactful in my opinion.
Yes.
Some games, I would argue, like at Epicenter Finals, that I felt like Alex was actually the most impactful on one map, like on Nuke. But usually, of course, you're usually going to look for Ziwu to be doing the heavy lifting and things like that. But it seems like Alex might just be kind of, this is such heavy speculation, but it feels like Alex is kind of like fed up with almost like how poor mechanically everyone around him and Ziwu are playing sometimes. Like, it's just like, when we're talking about EG, where the firepower is going to come from, with Vitality, you only know you're going to get it from one player every single game. And that's kind of ridiculous for what is supposed to be a tier 1 team.
Oh, of course.
So, and like there's just things about that team and how it functioned. Like when I watch them, where like with Shox' lurks, like they just don't always seem that impactful. Or like with RPK on like a second in kind of role, he just doesn't always find the trade that I would expect or something. Like things where like it doesn't seem like with Liquid, it seems like that team is composed like perfectly. With Vitality, it just kind of it's a little bit more hodgepodgey of just a group of people that, yeah, these are all kind of names, but do they actually interact that well together? It hasn't seemed like it, other than maybe a one-off tournament.
I will say, Moses, like, I don't really know that I buy the actual central reason he gave, because the reason he gave is like burnout and you have to play too many tournaments and he thought they were going to play less. I don't know if I believe that, because even though this year, in theory, there should be less days, actually, with the way that all the league structures and the circuits are structured, he knows what he's getting into when he becomes a pro player. Like, that feels to me more like what Mauisnake suggesting. First of all, his team had run dry. Like, they've run that lineup a lot. Secondly, they've already tried one move. They did the MBK for Shox move. There's not really many moves left if you're going to stay French. And the problem is right now, everyone else in the team could go non-French, but the one guy who can't is Ziwu, who's the fucking best player. So I feel like actually there's not a lot of options. Like, I can't believe he quit. Like, that's amazing to me. I wouldn't think that would be an option. I would have asked for, like, a few months off or something, but this is the end for Vitality as far as I can tell. They're fucked.
I'll take the other angle. Well, I agree that they're kind of fucked. I agree that I don't know where you go from here if you're Vitality. At this point, it feels like this is like a clean house moment, but in the French scene, I don't know where you go, because you have to keep Ziwu and you have to obviously surround him with French players because he can't speak fucking English. So that's a huge issue, but I mean, I've kind of thought they were fucked for some time now. I will take the other angle in the sense that I think Alex was very genuine. I think that's actually probably legit, the burnout. Mostly because, as someone who's part of the circuit, even more so than the players at times, I know what that burnout feels like. And I know I've seen other players experience that burnout. I will say winning solves that problem a little bit more than, like, if you're winning and you don't like the burnout.
That's kind of what I mean.
But I do think that this is I do think that this issue should be highlighted in his departure, because amongst all this conversation of the EPL versus Flashpoint and like how much rev share players are getting versus blah, 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 whatever it was, I think the big area of argument that is being forgotten is that burnout is such a massive issue when I think players' first priority at this point over even rev share is probably being in a competitive environment and having a calm down schedule. And those kind of go hand in hand when you want to be competitive and you have a schedule where you're not traveling 300 some days a year. And I think this is an important time to just say, it might not be now, it might not be next year, but within the next 3 to 5 years, if this conversation ever pops up again, I think this idea of burnout is going to be a massive problem, because you're going to start seeing players that have been 18, 5 years ago when they started their careers. They're not like young 20s. You're going to see these guys turn 25, 26, and they're going to want to have a girlfriend, they're going to have a wife, and they're going to want to get a dog, and they're going to want to have a kid, and they're going to want to buy a house. And this idea of burnout is going to be a problem down the road. And this isn't the first player we've probably lost to burnout, but it might be the most public and the most notarized in the sense that he was so vocal about it in his message. But it's not going to be the last one. I think burnout's going to be a massive problem moving forward.
You actually make a very good point there, by the way, which is, in the modern world, it's not like players... This isn't something that people just have to say on Twitter or on podcasts and that can never be changed. We're now in a world where people are having... I mean, to be fair, they've already just had them, so it's too late now, but we're having the discussions like the CSPPA and big bodies of teams are having discussions about the circuit and the format and how it's set up and what the rules are going to be and how... So these are the things you could bring up. It's just that, as far as I can tell, those things never get brought up. Like, I'll give you an example. When ESL announced the ESL Pro Tour, one of the things they did quite intelligently is say that they were going to up the prize money. I can't remember how much it went up from, but it went up to I think it was 4.75 million for the whole tour or something, which was more than whatever they used to have for the circuit in the past years. Now, that's a great angle to sell someone that there's more money. If I'm a player, I'd rather have the opposite deal, which is it's going to be like the same prize money as before, but just less events. So I'm going to give you guys the same opportunity to win the money, but you play 2 less events. Because one thing I do worry about is this is one area that players also haven't necessarily... I'm not going to say they haven't thought it through. They just decided against the factors that I'm in favour of. That's an area where it's actually kind of dangerous that you're now in that ESL Pro Tour. Because if you remember, one of the details, to be fair, I don't know if this is in the final agreement, but was going to be that you could only turn down 2 events a year. That's very different to the past. In theory, in the past, you can turn down any event. As long as it's not the major, you could. Like, if you don't want to play it, I mean, famously, Astralis turned down ESL Cologne in 2017 before that PGL Krakow. So even massive events you could turn down. The problem in the future is you actually might have less say as a player as to which events you go to. So, like, it's not a problem for me. I just have to go there and talk about it. I can do that whether I'm hungover, whether I just fucked someone. Who cares? The problem is you have to play in the game, mate. So, like, I would just say in the future, any time an opportunity arises like this, because at a very minimum, the discussions will happen. Just be very reticent of that, or be very cognizant, rather, if you're a player, that this is a big issue. If you could even take 2 lands a year out of your circuit, but still keep your salary, still be in a top team and still get to the big events, that is probably the ideal scenario for everyone right now.
Yeah, I thought where Moses was going to go was like in 3 to 5 years, we would talk about, I think it's just going to get more centralized. Like, I think that the leagues, since leagues are kind of taking over, maybe seasons will be a little bit longer and they're more in one area, because right now, their schedule resembles a rock star. It's flying all the time. But rock stars are touring for, maybe 4 months out of a year or something like that. And then they can be home for 8 months and just kind of work on their craft, work on their music or whatever. They don't have to actually do anything else. With gaming and esports, you have to travel so much that, there's going to be burnout. You have to fly all the time. You have to perform mechanically at a level that I'd say is higher than rock stars. Like, rock stars kind of know the notes they're going to play. They know what they're going to sing. Maybe it's tough on their throats, but like, there's not too many professions right now where you have to be like this mechanically strong.
Just avoid all. I'm just avoiding all temptation to make a childish joke about Shazam or something. You knew where I was going, Moses. I've been in too many green rooms now, mate. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah.
Why?
Well, I just think that it has to get a little bit more stable in terms of like location. Like, maybe they can be in 2 leagues and then they can spend half their time in LA, half their time in London, something like that. And then you basically, like, on your road to being a pro player, you're going to accept the fact that you're going to have to move to these places, just like how an NBA player has to accept that. I think you have to move to Oklahoma or something.
I think the big problem with esports at the moment in that sense is, because I agree, I would actually much prefer over like league centric circuit. I would much prefer to have, like, the comparisons that we've seen like throughout all of them, whether it's golf with the PGA Tour, whether it's the tennis tour, whether it's Formula One, that have all the different stops around the world. The problem with that is, at the moment, you have 2 options. You either need to let kill off everyone and let one entity and one tournament organizer decide what all the stops are going to be, or you need to get the 2 or 3 major TOs to work together to create a tour of that notoriety, and each entity gets their 2 or 3 events throughout the year, whatever it might be, and you set up and structure the pro tour that way. Unfortunately, some of those options at the moment just are not humanly possible. TOs at the moment aren't working together in that fashion, which, I mean, again, they're businesses. I don't have the authority to disagree with any of those. The big problem
with this whole topic, Moses, is that this experiment has already been tried. It's what Valve did like 2 years ago in Dota. They made basically like an APT tour, but it was the Dota Pro Tour. And what they did is they took all these people and said, bid for an event at a certain month or whatever, and we'll decide who gets it. So DreamHack gets Dream League is a major on this month, and then the next major is going to be whatever, the Kiev major that PGL's running. And the problem is this. They did it, and initially, I remember praising it loads on Twitter, thinking, this is fucking amazing. But as you'd expect, whenever a game dev runs everything, game devs aren't from our community. Like, some of those people have different priorities. So unfortunately, it sort of got gradually worse over time, and there was a lot of problems with, like, it became like having majors in CSGO. It became a poison chalice to run an event, and you lost money. And then, actually now the fact that you're in a semi-open circuit, but like sometimes you want to go head-to-head with someone and be just before them and see if you can beat them in business. So unfortunately, these are like a lot of government issues, basically. The easiest solution is you just have a really cool guy be in charge and he's going to decide everything, right? But that almost is never going to happen in reality, unfortunately. Right. So I totally agree with your premise. It's just that making it work in reality is fucking hard.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely, I know that it's near impossible.
And I don't know who I would trust. Like right now, I can't pick anyone. I don't want ESL, don't want Valve. I wouldn't want our people to run everything. Like, I want ESL to keep doing the shit they're good at,
I'll do it. You guys can trust me.
We'll see about that. Obvious joke there would be, is that what you said to Samla? What about, you know, right towards, you know, end of 2017, was it? You were like, it's all right, Sam, I'll keep it warm for you. Anyway, you'll be back in no time, you know.
Shake it off. Shake it off.
Exactly. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly Patreon AMA. Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take a part in the Patreon discussion with me each month. Well, if any of these perks tickle your fancy, then put your money where your mouth is by joining the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.